Czechoslovakia's journey under communist rule began during the aftermath of the Second World War, when Joseph Stalin provided troops and political advisors to support a coup that removed all non-communists from government in 1948. Under the leadership of Klement Gottwald, the head of the Czech Communist Party, the country was transformed into a loyal Soviet satellite state. This marked the beginning of 2 decades of strict communist control and alignment with Moscow's interests. The period following the communist takeover was marked by severe hardships for the Czech people. The Soviet Union effectively controlled the country through an extensive network of mechanisms, including a powerful secret police force that maintained strict social control. The Czech economy was restructured to serve Soviet interests, leading to a scarcity of consumer goods for ordinary citizens, while media and communication channels also faced strict censorship. The political purges between 1949 and 1954 were particularly devastating, targeting a wide range of Czech society. Democratic politicians, military leaders, and religious communities such as Catholics and Jews all faced persecution. Even those with wartime connections to the West or high-ranking communists that were now deemed unreliable were not spared. By 1966, public discontent had reached a boiling point, manifesting in student demonstrations against the low standard of living and the restriction of basic freedoms. In 1968, a significant change occurred when Alexander Dubček was elected as first secretary of the Czech Communist Party. Initially, the Soviet leadership approved of Dubček, viewing him as someone who could make the government more effective while maintaining loyalty to Moscow. Dubček's vision was unique as he remained committed to communism and the Warsaw Pact, but also believed in what he called socialism with a human face. In April 1968, Dubček introduced a comprehensive and far-reaching series of political reforms, which would become known as the Prague Spring. Censorship was relaxed, allowing public criticism of government actions for the first time in decades. Trade unions received expanded powers, while central government control over industry was reduced. Regional governments gained greater autonomy, and trade relationships with Western nations were expanded. Perhaps most significantly, citizens were granted greater freedom to travel abroad, opening Czechoslovakia to outside influences that had long been restricted. While discussions about multi-party elections occurred, Dubček and other communist leaders emphasized that such changes were not imminent, in an attempt to reassure Moscow that their reforms would not threaten fundamental communist control. The Soviet leadership, now under Leonid Brezhnev, watched the developments in Czechoslovakia with increasing alarm. They feared that Dubček's reforms would spread to other satellite states, particularly given Romania's refusal to attend Warsaw Pact meetings and Yugoslavia's independent stance under Josip Tito. The potential loss of control over a strategically important satellite state threatened the very foundation of Soviet authority in Eastern Europe. Throughout Dubček's leadership, Brezhnev attempted various measures to contain his reforms. He maintained direct communication with Dubček, constantly urging restraint, while simultaneously organizing threatening military exercises in Czechoslovakia. The Soviet leader kept a close watch on Dubček's diplomatic contacts, particularly his interactions with Romania and Yugoslavia, viewing any sign of independent foreign policy as a potential threat to Soviet control. On August 20th, 1968, the Soviet Union took decisive action by launching a massive military intervention. A force of 500,000 Warsaw Pact troops invaded Czechoslovakia, effectively ending the Prague Spring. The Czech army was ordered to remain in their barracks, resulting in minimal military resistance. However, civilian protests and individual acts of defiance were widespread, as roads were barricaded and armoured vehicles were attacked with Molotov cocktails. The invading forces, who had been told they were invited to restore order, encountered unexpected hostility from the local population, revealing the deep disconnection between Soviet expectations and the Czech reality. The consequences of the Soviet invasion were swift and comprehensive. Alexander Dubček was arrested and transported to Moscow, where he was forced to reverse his reform policies. By 1969, Dubček was dismissed and replaced by Gustav Husak, a hardline loyalist who implemented a severe crackdown that resulted in the arrest of over 1,000 Czech citizens. This marked the beginning of 2 decades of renewed and strictly Soviet-approved communist rule. On September 26, 1968, the Soviet newspaper Pravda published what became known as the Brezhnev Doctrine. This policy provided the theoretical framework for Soviet intervention, arguing that the actions of individual communist countries affected the entire communist movement. It established the principle that communist countries had not only the right, but the duty to intervene if another's actions threatened the movement, effectively declaring that reform efforts that could weaken communism would not be tolerated. The Brezhnev Doctrine served multiple purposes in Soviet policy, acting as a warning to the satellite states and a formal assertion of Soviet authority over its sphere of influence. The suppression of the Prague Spring profoundly impacted the communist world, reinforcing Soviet control over Eastern Europe. The events in Czechoslovakia led to the strengthening of hardline communist leadership and caused a significant deterioration in East-West relations. The Soviet response also demonstrated the fundamental limits of liberal reform within the Soviet system and significantly influenced future opposition movements. The Prague Spring also contributed to the eventual collapse of communism in the Soviet Union in 1989 and serves as a powerful symbol of both the possibility of peaceful reform and the brutal reality of authoritarian suppression.